guys, so today we're going to be making a dynamic grid-based pattern that can be used for typography or something like a circle, but yeah, any graphic element really. So it's a semi-procedural workflow and there's technically no keyframes needed. All you need to do is set up your grid, apply the expression, and then use a driver video or composition to move the animation. So technically how it works is you have a circle and you scale the circle based off of the brightness value of a driver composition. So you can think of it as the dark areas in the composition create smaller circles and the brighter areas create larger circles. So a value of 0, which would be black, we give a scale of 0%, but a value that is white, so that would be 255, would be 100%. So a designer who's used this grid-based style very strongly in their work is Wim Crowell. Wim Crowell really focused on grid-based posters and really using the grid to inform the design, and the grid really being heroed in the artwork. So in this poster you can really see how that grid is being used and how the type and the shape is really being informed by that grid. So we've got to talk about the design studio more McNeil, which really focuses on generative typefaces. So using strict grid-based structures to create letter forms within those grids. So you can see an example here where the larger the circle, the thicker the weight of the font. So with that all being said, we're going to be creating some really interesting animations considering this grid. It's non-destructive, it's pretty clean, there's only like 5 lines of code, it's fully customizable so you can use any graphic element and you can use any driver animation, but it does get a little bit slow when you start to use a lot of elements and you have to set up the grid manually if you don't have any plugins, but that would be like that for anything. So yeah, anyway, hopefully you guys find this useful and you learn something. I'll be leaving the code in the description if you just want to paste it in, and yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy the tutorial and I'll see you there. Okay, so we're going to start out with our main composition. We're going to start in Illustrator and we're going to build out our grid first. So we have our canvas. We need to be able to fit a distribution of circles in this, and I guess the best way to figure this out is to consider the aspect ratio. So if we just go ahead and make a circle first, like so, and we just make this white, we know that our canvas is 16 by 9. So if we go and duplicate this 16 times, okay, so we have 16 there, and then we just pull this into the width like that, and then just align that to the top. We should be able to fit this perfectly horizontally as well, as we can see. So this is a little bit too big for us, so I'm going to just halve this in size. So you can see that it's 240 pixels. So I'm going to make this 120, and I'm just going to align that to the corners. And then I'm just going to repeat that process and just duplicate it all the way. And because we've gone down the center, it will fit nicely. And we can do the same that way. Okay, so we have our composition. I'm actually just going to make this inverted. So we've got all of our elements in one layer. And if we brought this into After Effects now, we'd get everything inside one layer, and we want all the layers to be exploded so that they're sitting on a different channel in After Effects. So we can do this by going up here into the burger menu, and then we just click release to layers, and this essentially explodes them all out into their own layer. And then what we can do is we can select all of these layers, and if we go back to the top, we can just pull this out, and then if we go all the way back down, we can just get rid of that redundant layer now. So now they've all got these funky colors. That's pretty fun. So if we just go and save this now, I'm then just going to drop this into After Effects. So this might take a little second to come in, but yeah, we just want to import it as a composition, and we want to use the layer size because they should be the same. And then if we just hit OK, then we just have to wait a little bit because there is quite a few elements here. I'd recommend starting and testing this effect out with a lot less circles, getting the setup right, and then when you want to do something, you can then design it and yeah, add a few more circles. So you can see that we now have our circle array, and if we just wait a second, we can see all of our content in here. Okay, so if you remember earlier, if we go back into Illustrator, each circle is 120 pixels by 120 pixels. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into After Effects, and we're just going to make a composition that is 120 by 120. And yeah, that's the settings for that. So what we need to do now is we can just drop in an ellipse, and obviously if you just double click, that's going to open that up, and yeah, we can go back into our main composition and we can select all of these, and now we're basically just going to instantiate what we've just done. So this circle composition, and we're just going to drag with everything being selected, holding down Alt and just selecting all of that. You can also do Shift A. You can see I've missed some stuff here. So again, just dropping all of that in. And now this is instantiated, which means that anything we change in this one composition will affect everything in this composition. And that's really good. So It allows some pretty cool things like this. You can create some really interesting patterns just from doing this. So that's good to know. I'm just going to center this for now. So the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up our driver. Pretty much you can use anything for this. You can use footage, or you can use some gradients or blurred shapes, whatever works best for you. For the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to be using a noise texture, but I really advise you to craft your own driver and really hone in that animation, because this is where the beauty comes out really. So yeah, I'm just going to be creating a solid quickly, and I'll just grab fractal noise. You've all seen this before, and yeah, just going to set everything to 0, scale it up a little bit, increase the contrast, this kind of thing, and yeah, just scaling that up. So I'm actually going to invert it, because if you remember, the brightness level is actually what causes the change in value or the increase in value. So yeah, I want this to be the less dominant quantity in the composition. So I'm going to do something like that. Could also add a Gaussian blur just to kind of ease that color, spread that color out a little bit, get some smoother edges. Obviously you want to be careful that you're not getting like this weird vignette, but I think it's all right for this tutorial. So anyway, we're going to be calling this our driver and this our main comp. And we're going to call this our instance, and we're just going to give it instance A, because I'm going to be showing you some other effects. You just get rid of this for fun. So we have our driver, we have our instance, and we have our main comp. So we're going to go into our main comp, and we're going to drop in our driver at the very top. I'm just going to, you can see an issue here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a rectangle tool. I'm going to put that underneath, and I'm just going to scale it up a bunch, and you can see that this is now gone. So we can hide this for now, and I'm just going to be doing the main expression just off this first one. I think it's fine. So we just hit S and then alt click this little stopwatch. We can then enter this main section. If you want to enter these main sections, you just need to press this button here. Okay, that's going to allow you to enter these different panels, which is really useful, I found. So yeah, that's good to know. So the first thing we need to do in our code is to call out that driver layer. We're going to do source equals thisComp.layer, and then we're just going to call this driver. And remember to use brackets here as well. So we're going to do like so, and we can just delete that. And then remember to use your parentheses. So I've just called out the driver, and what we need to do now is allow the code to go through every single pixel and identify the light areas and identify the dark areas. So what we're going to do is we're going to call out the sample function. So we're going to call out that source layer with this, and we're going to go sample image. So we're sampling the image at the position of each pixel, and then we're just going to be using the red values here, and then square brackets, and we're just going to put 0 and then our parentheses like so. So we've called out our source layer, we've organized all of our values, all of our pixels and their brightness value, and now we need to scale or have some scale variable that we can then assign to that scale function. So this is the next thing that we're going to do. So we're going to call it S for scale. This is now the range. So we're going to use an ease function, which is going to allow us to interpolate between our values easier and nicer. And we're going to use that value function that we just made. And then we want our range to be from 0 to 1. And then our actual range is from 0 to 100%. So we've gone from light to dark, and then we're going 0 to 100%. And then again, our parentheses. And then, yeah, we're just going to set this value now. And because we're scaling uniformly, all we need to do is just assign those different functions in there. And that's it. That's all we need to add really. So, and it looks like we have an error here. Looks like we need to add an S there. So I'm going to fix it. Yeah, so it looks like I haven't actually typed this out very well. So we want position, and we want to spell it correctly. You can tell this isn't my strong point, like so. And then if we go out of there, all of our code should work. And you can see that this has now gone very small. So we just written our first line of code. How the hell are we going to assign this to each and every single one of these layers? That's going to be very monotonous going into every single one. So there's a way around this, right? So you click into the scale, you right click and you go copy expression, and then you select all of our layers like so, and then you're just going to do Shift Command V, and it may take a moment to load. Obviously there is a lot of elements going on here and it's doing a lot of calculations, so I definitely recommend going lower just to get the system working, and then you can figure it out. And there we are. So we've got it working. At the moment it's the same color as the background, so I'm just going to make this white, and I'm going to go into the main comp, and I'm actually going to just double click this, and I'm going to put this at the very bottom, and I'm going to make this black. So once it's at the bottom, I'm just going to make it black. So obviously there's a lot to play with here, right? So So we can go into our driver and we can go into our evolution. We can alt click, we can go times. We could select the time and we could times it by 70 so that it now moves over time. So using this value to drive this variable, which is pretty cool. And we can see how this is working in After Effects. And using that ease function, it's allowing the speed to slow down when it reaches its maximum value. So we don't just have to use circles. We could use the letter A, for example, or just any letter. So I've just done Shift Alt Command T. I'm just going to type out A, and I'm just going to center it in our composition like so. And then I'm just going to hit Y and just align that anchor point and just scale it up like so, about there. So now we've got this really nice looking thing, and we can scale this down a little bit more like so. You know, we could start animating this. So put that there, we can move it off like there. Could come on, hang out there for a bit, and then it could go back, and then you can give that some ease. If you want to give it ease and you don't have the plugin, you can go keyframe assistant, easy ease, come into this graph editor, select everything, and then you just want to pull these anchor points in, and you're going to get some really nice motion like so. So we can see how this is looking, get some really nice moments. You could also do something crazy as well. So if we just make this driver completely white just to start with, you could select every other channel and just offset it so that it kind of delays over time, which could be really nice as well. You can also use different drivers and different compositions and layer those two together. So we've got a second comp here, and I'm going to make a second driver. So all I'm going to do with this different driver is I'm just going to decrease the brightness a little bit, but just essentially make less white. And then I'm just going to assign this to this driver. And then this second instance, I'm going to make a middle gray like so. Scale this to like 45, let's say. Let's keep that to 100%. So yeah, just going to make that roughly a middle gray. Then in this composition, I'm just going to pull up the scale, and then in this range, I'm just going to go to 50% for this, and I can just copy the expression again, go all the way down, and just paste this in like so. So I'm just going to drop our second instance in now. So I'm just going to call this instance B. Remember to just be patient when it's loading. It's not crashing. It's literally just running through all of these elements. There's just a lot of points to process. But yeah, I'm just going to call this instance B, and then yeah, instantiate that. So I'm just going to make a new composition with our first comp, and we have this, and then I'm just going to drop in the second composition like so, and yeah, we get some pretty cool effects here. I'm actually just going to offset this by 60, so you remember that the size of the circle is 120 pixels, and I just want to shift it across halfway. I remember the anchor point is in the center, so we're almost just going half of a full width to get everything down the middle, and you'll see what I mean in a sec when everything's now in the centered section. And yeah, I just think this approach looks really nice, and yeah, it just adds another layer to your design that's really cool. And again, you know, you can use any type of video for this. It doesn't just have to be a noise layer. And yeah, I just wanted to show you this effect. I know that there's loads of different ways of approaching this, especially in Blender. This is something that Blender really shines in. But yeah, hopefully you guys have found this useful and you can apply it in some sort of interesting way. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.